So, welcome to the second Insight lecture for the day. And actually, firstly, I'll welcome you to Melbourne's photo show. And thank you all for coming. Can I just see a show of hands? Is it your first time at Melbourne's photo show? About half the room, okay, so half of you have been here before. It's a wonderful day, and so welcome to the first-timers. I hope you're here for the whole day and you've planned your day because there's so many different activities. And if you're looking for something to do, if you feel a bit lost, feel free to ask any one of us, and we'll give you heaps of ideas of ways you can spend your day. So I'm glad you've chosen to spend the next 45 or so minutes here with us. Feel really privileged to have and to introduce Aliki Smith to you guys. My name's Carly Michael. This is my family's business. I'm fifth generation, and I've been managing the imaging department for the last 5-6 years. Imaging department is another word for film department, and developing and processing D&P. So I've had the privilege over the last 5-6 years to really be inside and oversee the renaissance of film photography, because film has come back. Like vinyl has come back, film has really come back to life. You might be aware Kodachrome has just re-released Ektachrome, which it discontinued back in 2013, its last slide film. So it's a really special time, and Aliki Smith has been she's done this publication of She Shoots Film, which started as a digital publication in 2014, and has been now in print for 2 editions, and later this month she's releasing the 3rd edition. I know she's just finally sent the last the final copy to print. So I know she's been working really hard, and we're really grateful that she's given us the time to come and speak with us today. So I want to welcome you all. Thank you, Aliki, for coming to speak. And she's going to explain all about her publication. Now, we'll let you know, and I'll repeat at the end, we are selling issue 2 today downstairs, and Aliki, after this talk, will be there and she'll sign copies for you if you purchase one today. We're also going to take pre-orders for issue 3, and Aliki's kindly offered to sign those copies as well when we receive them, and we'll have them available for pickup if you pre-order today. So that's really exciting, and I won't take up any more of your time because I'd like to bring to the stage Aliki. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. Thank you, Michaels. It's a privilege to be here, and thank you everyone for joining me this morning. It's really wonderful to see a full room of people that are interested in film, and more specifically women in film. So what we're here about today is film photography and words by women in print, and in independent print in particular. So I'm just going to float through and I'll take questions at the end. Actually, before I get started, I do like to start with a little bit of a show of hands just to get to know you a little bit too. Who here uses digital for photography? Like everyone, hey? Digital's so easy, you just kind of go to it, and I think it's so accessible, and that's part of the wonderful nature of digital. Who here uses film? Yeah, okay, so again, a pretty fair amount of people, so that's really great to see. Who here has printed a photograph in the last year? Fantastic. Okay, so I think the point I'm trying to make here is, there is a space for digital, a really wonderful space for digital. There is a space for film, and there's a space for print. And, as we move further and further into digital and the beauty of digital that it's given us, there's still this niche area for film and print. And that's what we're about with women. This particular image, just to kick things off, is by Elizabeth Casasola. So she appears in our 3rd issue. And this particular artist is from Mexico. So just to let you know, before I get into the particulars of the magazine itself, the publication, we are a global publication, and we're supported globally, but really supported locally as well by the awesome Michaels, and also Fox Darkroom that's local as well. So I've got some major sorts of topics that I'll be going through this morning, and one of them is exploring the landscape of film photography in contemporary society. And just like Carly said, totally on the same page, like films had what is probably considered a renaissance. So it's really come back to life, and I think there's probably numerous reasons for that, and many of us probably know some of those reasons. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, you know, what's happening. So last night, so in preparation for this particular presentation, I had a little bit of I explored a little bit in terms of social media and what's going on out there. And I just had a quick look at Instagram last night, and if you look up a hashtag like film photography, it brings up 11.5 million Instagram posts. It brings up, if you look at Believe in Film, it's 2.2 million Instagram posts. I Shoot Film, 4.5 million. Film is Alive, 1 million. We've got 85K. So we're, you know, we're kind of out there. We're quite specific. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that if you check in at any point in time in terms of social media, film's got a real presence. So we've got this massive influx of images out there, Instagram being one of the vehicles that we see images and all the time. But even though film's really tangible and we use film in that really practical way, it still has a really fantastic digital presence. So I've just picked up a few facts. So we're seeing film growth of 5% year on year globally. Now that's come from someone called Giles Braithwaite from Harman, and they make Ilford film. Nikon is still selling film cameras. I believe it was Canon that just stopped creating film cameras at the start of this year. But the second-hand market, if you jump on eBay or you jump on Gumtree, come to Michaels, you're going to see film cameras. So the second-hand market's still very vibrant, if not more vibrant than ever, probably. Items such as Polaroid, instant film, Instax, hugely popular. People love film, they love to touch it, and they love the immediacy of instant too. There's also some smaller companies like Mint and Reflex, which are creating their own products, and a few others that have come into play. Rolleiflex, some of you may know Rolleiflex with twin lens reflex cameras. They're coming back with something, and the second-hand market's really healthy. But also things like purchase of film, it's huge. If you have a look, you know, go downstairs at Michaels or you walk in, you know, there's this beautiful sort of wall of E6. You know, it's gorgeous, it's vibrant. So film's really big. Film processing, scanning, all of these services I think are probably experiencing a really healthy upswing. And what's really interesting if we think about film is it's been around for ages. But what's really interesting is that a third of new film shooters are under 35. You know, and about 60% have reported that they've just started using film in the last 5 years, which indicates that film is, you know, although it's a niche, it's really healthy. People are interested, people are engaged. They want to do things like engage in slow photography. They want to take it down a notch. They want to be a little bit more considered and thoughtful in the way they make images. And I think digital is wonderful because it's so accessible. You can pick up your phone, you can take pictures of anyone, anytime, but film provides that difference and that slightly more considered approach. And I think in our fast-paced life, people are really looking for that. Ektachrome. So who here has come across Ektachrome at all? So Ektachrome is slide film, E6, positive film. So when you pick it up after it's been processed, it's beautiful. You pick it up and there's these tiny images on a reel of film that's really vibrant with colour. It's a little bit different to negative because it's probably a little bit less grainy, but it's beautiful. And it's one of the films that Kodak has released this year. Well, it's re-released, so it's been around for some time, but it's re-released, which again shows that in terms of the landscape of film photography, it's really experiencing a re-emergence and a new uptake. So if you get a chance, try Exochrome. So I'm going to end there in terms of the landscape, in terms of generalised film photography, and I'm going to move on to the female gaze. And obviously these topics are all very strong and dear to She Shoots Film, obviously film being our big thing and women in film, and that's why I'm going to turn it a little bit to the female gaze, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and what that's looking like in contemporary society. So just to provide a little bit of a history, I guess, in terms of the gaze, I do like to talk a little bit about the male gaze because often people talk about, more in a contemporary nature, people do talk about the female gaze and what that might mean. But back in quite some time ago, I think it was 1975 or 1976, Laura Mulvey came up with something called the male gaze. And it was in an essay that she wrote that's called Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. And she was particularly interested in filmmaking, but it's really applicable to any medium where you're making images. So whether it's a moving image or a still image, people use these terms gaze and looking at and to be looked at really regularly. But Laura Mulvey really coined that term and brought it to the surface. So she asserted that the male gaze occurs when the audience is put into the perspective of a hetero man. The theory suggests that the male gaze denies women human identity, relegating them to the status of object, and exists only in relation to the male. So that was her understanding, or what she sort of put out there. And it was really contentious. Like, it really provided this sort of impetus for people to talk about, how are we looking at people? How are we looking at women? And who's doing the looking at, and who's putting the images out there, and what does this mean in society? And I think that in our current society, that's become super important, and it's really, again, experiencing this new re-emergence of what does the gaze mean. So I do like to talk a little bit about the male gaze. That's all I'm going to say about the male gaze. So I will move on because obviously She Shoots Film is about women and the female gaze. Now, Charlotte Jansen is someone that has created a book called Girl on Girl, and she talks about women making images of women by women. So it's really creating a different space there and the female gaze. And she says that the ways in which images of women are being created and used has shifted over the last 5 years. So it's really experienced, we're experiencing something really different now. And this just seems to be down to the fact that more women are getting involved in photography. Now, I mean, I'm not exactly sure about the statistics on that, but I think women have always been involved in photography. The accessibility for women to be involved in photography has probably been more limited historically. Women have probably always been interested in photography and wanted to be involved. But I think now with new mediums in electronic media, whether that be channels like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., women are finding new avenues to sort of create and put their work out there, which is a really great space to be in. It's really dynamic and it's really new. Or it's not new, it's just, it's becoming stronger. So why the need to highlight the female gaze? I might just talk a little bit about this and why is there a need? And Charlotte says the aim is to come to, she says, why is there a need to highlight only female photographers if the aim is to come to photographs of women neutrally without identifying the gender of their maker? But given the long-established bias of heteropatriarchy, which she kind of takes on a bit of that Mulvey stuff about the hetero stuff, we still have a long way to go to kind of redress that balance. So, and I think that's where She Shoots Film comes in. It really is about bringing women to the forefront and really celebrating women making images from their perspective, in their lived experience, and really telling their own stories. So it's, She Shoots Film is definitely not about, we believe that having men as part of, and males as part of our voice and supporting us is equally, if not more important than women, because it really is about being supported, and it is about noting that there is a space for women, and the way to do that is to go on that journey together. But She Shoots Film is really about, you know, women creating images. So She Shoots Film. Who here before today knew about She Shoots Film? A few of you? Yeah, great. So some of you will know about us, and some of you will not, and it'll be a new thing. So I'm hoping that you come away from today and go, oh, might be something of interest to you, and you take it up a little bit. Actually, before I go on, I've got a couple of notes before I go on to She Shoots Film more specifically. I might just stop there. So I've got some figures here just to let you know some of the realities of today's environment, and it really contextualises things and grounds things, I think. But I'm just going to read this out because I think it's really informative. In 2017, which was just last year, 153 magazine covers from 10 of the leading US fashion publications, including Vogue, W, and Harper's Bazaar, which are huge, were shot mostly by men, with only 13.7% of cover images being shot by women. So that's really, really stark. Some women's magazines, like Marie Claire, which many of us will know, went all year without hiring a single woman photographer for a cover shoot. According to women's commercial content creator platform called Already Made, data from major photography publications and awards organisations recorded that male photographers made up between 89 and 96% of those advertising categories between 2013 and 2017. So really recent stats there. There's, you know, obviously there's a real presence for men there. And obviously that makes it difficult for women to get into the industry. You know, so women that are photographing, you know, and are interested in editorial, it's going to make it difficult for them to get in. So that's an obvious thing when we consider those types of figures. But it means that women will continue to see advertising and editorial shot mostly by men, who will be the ones making decisions about how women are portrayed. And I think that that sort of editorial and advertising component is super important, because that's what a lot of us see. That's what a lot of us are exposed to. There are fantastic publications out there that are about fine art and really showing that diversity in terms of gaze and image making. But many of us will walk down the street and be inundated with images that are essentially advertising. And, you know, looking at figures like that, it just would really be great to see more women being enabled and proactively supported to come into those areas, and to show a gaze that's something of difference and something to enrich that space. And the wonderful thing is that many, many more organisations and companies are really actively supporting that. Today, Michael's have five speakers, 5 awesome people coming on board to speak to you guys, and 4 out of the 5 are women. And, you know, that's a credit to Michael's, because actually that's not the norm. That's something that says they are proactively going out and supporting women. And I think that's where, you know, true credit and true change comes through. So a little bit about She Shoots Film. So She Shoots Film, we started in 2014, so we've been on the block for about 4 years, so not new, but not you know, we're kind of young, but we've been around a little bit. And we started as on the digital front, and it really was an idea. So back in 2014, I was involved with some groups in the film front, global groups and local groups, and in participating in those groups electronically and physically, you know, what I did come to notice pretty quickly at the time was that there was a really strong male presence, and I think that there were some women on board, but I felt like there was just a little bit of an imbalance there. But the women that were on board were fantastic. It was like, wow, this is really great to meet other females that are into film. So I had a couple of friends in the film photography area, men and women, but I had one particular friend who's Lucy Wainwright, and she's located in the UK, and I reached out to her early 2014 and said, look, Lucy, I've been thinking about putting something out there, creating something that's specific to women and film. What do you think about that? And she basically said, yes, let's do something. And, that's all it took. It was a really loose idea and something that was, based on passion and interest and enthusiasm and, engaging in film photography, like just film photography mad. So it was really a passion sort of idea. And from there not long after that, we created She Shoots Film. And I think I'm just trying to go back, but from memory it was I think we tried it as just as a Facebook page. From memory, it started as a Facebook page. So it was really still a very loose idea. But from my perception back then, it really was an idea that wasn't validated. So I really didn't know we didn't really know whether this was something that people would be keen on or interested or anything like that, but thought, we'll give it a go, put this Facebook page out there and see how we go. And sure enough, we had a tremendous response really quickly. We had heaps of women being interested and reaching out and basically saying, how can we be involved? What does it mean to be involved? What can that look like? And of course, we didn't know because we didn't have any clear sort of journey about how that might look. There was nothing really planned at that stage. But the fact was that those initial stages indicated and sort of validated that idea, and that was really a really positive experience. So She Shoots Film started with myself, Lucy Wainwright, and Lily Schwartz, and she's from Spain. So me from here, being an Aussie, Lucy from the UK, and Lily from Spain, and she was originally from Germany. And I think in starting it up, having that global tie was really great, because sometimes, we know what's going on locally, but we feel a little bit alienated from the rest of the world. But having that other perspective was really important and helpful as well. It was understanding how different areas operated and what they were into and what they were experiencing. And it was just great to have other female film shooters that were into different things, like we're each into different things. So Lucy was really interested in experimental photography. Every week she'd be updating us, about something that she was doing experimentally, chemical stuff and nature stuff and all sorts of things. Whereas Lily was, she was just prolific. She'd shoot, 10 rolls a day. Street photographer, 10 rolls a day, really different, each of us. But then so at the start, that's all there was. Over time, so over the last 4 years, we've brought different people on board for different reasons. So starting on the digital realm, we really didn't have a need for, say, a senior editor at the time. We really didn't have a need for a designer, a graphic designer. And Ruby came on a little bit afterward because she had some other interesting bits and pieces that she wanted to offer. So that's how we started. So just a quick poster for you, which I really like this poster because I think it depicts something that can sometimes be perceived as really complex, but it's pretty simple, like publications versus website. And when we started, print was not part of the idea at all. It didn't even go there. We just thought, we just want to support women in film photography. We just want to provide an avenue. We just want to provide a vehicle for women to have a voice. And that was really just digital at the time. But as we, and I'll talk more about this and go a little bit more in depth over the next couple of slides about how we made that transition from sort of web sort of stuff to more physical sort of publication. But this one really sums it up nicely, and it's part of a group called Half Letter Press. If you're interested in publishing, interested in indie publishing, independent publishing, this particular outfit, this group, Half Letter Press, they're fantastic. They've been around for some time, and they're really interesting because from their perspective, it's all about making things accessible. So whether that be creating PDFs, whether that be creating a Word document, handing a little magazine out, handing a pamphlet out, it's just about making things accessible. And they're very, they're very open, collaborative. So I think that sums it up pretty nicely. It's really nice. In fact, I often think about it in terms of, you know how some people have this sort of battle between digital versus film. I don't really take to that. I believe there's a space for, like I said at the outset, I think there's a beautiful space for digital, and that's sort of really easy. You know, I'm going to take lots of images, and there's some real there's a real need for that, particularly for certain types of photography. But I also think there's a space for film. I think the same about publications, physical publications and electronic. I don't necessarily think that one should live more than the other. My perception of it is there's a space for both. And if we can come together to create something or things that kind of respect both, or if there's a space for that, fantastic, bonus. And that takes me to the next slide. So I'm just going to go through a quick rundown of the timeline of us. And I've already alluded to this, but I'm going to go through a little bit more detail. So we started in 2014 with a loose idea about bringing women's film photography to the forefront. In February 2015, so about a year later, so we'd been on the scene for about a year, just doing this Facebook stuff and just reaching out to women, creating connections, networking, having lots of chats and just getting out there. The next year, what we did was we did a call out, and it was in conjunction with International Women's Day that year. And we said, look, it was just a call out for women to submit work that they had created using film with the theme self-portrait. And what we got back was we got a really huge response. We had so many women submitting their images of themselves, and it was really incredible. And what we were seeing, I mean, She Shoots Film is really about supporting amateur, you know, medium, right up to really professional photographers that have been around for decades. But what we saw was a real diversity in the types of images and the photographers that were submitting stuff. And it, again, at that point, a year on from starting, validated that idea about, hey, there's a real space for this. I think people really want to know. People want to be involved. So let's continue on with that. It was more than, so it was quite some time after that we released our first crowdfunding campaign for self-portrait. So that was toward the end of 2016. And what we found, what happened was we'd obviously been in the digital realm for a little while by this stage, at least a couple of years. And I said to the group, look, I think there might be a space to create something here in print, something that people can hold. And I had a really mixed response from the group, from the original group. I had some of the women saying, no, don't want to do a publication. And then I had others that were like, yes, let's do it, right? So I was really torn from the start. So I sat with it for at least a few months. And then I went back to the group and I said, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a crowdfunding campaign, and we're going to test this. And if we have people that come on board to validate that this actually is something that people are interested in, fantastic. And if we don't, that's okay. You know, if we don't, it just means that's not an avenue that we'll necessarily take. But let's give it a go. So we did. In October through to December 2016, we ran our first crowdfunding campaign and were successful. So again, another idea validated through sort of a crowdfunding gig. And from there, we were shortly, really, within 3 to 4 months, we produced our first print publication, which I don't unfortunately have any more local copies to sell. There's very few left. But if you're interested, please come up and have a look at the first one if you haven't seen it. It is different to our second one, and this is the one that set us in motion. So that's number one. And that's the one that was printed in April 2017. So not long after that, by the end of that year, last year, we were ready to go to print with issue 2, which was Mother. So Mother was slightly different, both in terms of the physical, sort of the design element, but also in terms of submissions. So we had a lot of people that, a lot of women that were basically, by this stage, they were really reaching out to us. So they were really interested and wanted to provide, but we were also reaching out to people that had something to say on the topic of Mother. So number 2 came along in April 2017. Sorry, January 2018. A few months ago, we launched our second crowdfunding campaign, and that was for Metamorphosis. Again, theme-based, that's how we roll. And again, we were successful. So we've just sent that one off to the printer, and that's already been printed and is off to the binder. So just a quick timeline in terms of how that's moved. It's really been not an overnight process. It's been 4 years, and it's tried to be really considered. Indie publishing. So independent publishing is a different realm in itself. So we have different ways of, the way people consider indie publishing is really different and really subjective. So anything from, being independent means being free, indie is being true to yourself despite the adversity, small scale but big impact, and someone else has said it's primarily about freedom of expression and less a matter of size. And that's often the case in indie. You might have very small print runs, but often those smaller publications, and there's many now, it's really amazing, they often have something really strong to say, and something that's usually a niche rather than, hey, I've got Cosmopolitan or Clio or whatever it is, or Girlfriend, and it's, sort of open slather. They're really targeted. I'm going to forward on from this because I'm just conscious of time. If you're interested in any self-publishing, indie publishing stuff, just pop your name at the end and I'll send this to you. I'm happy to provide this as a resource to anyone that wants to check any one of the, because I've got various links throughout this. I'm happy to share this with anyone. So just a few questions for those of you that are interested in indie publishing. I've got the question there, never been easier, right? It's got kind of. We've got access to technology, we make these global connections, we have access, and that's amazing. We have access to services such as Blurb, which enable DIY movements, but also on the downturn, or the more sort of challenging aspect of it is sustaining independent publishing can be hard. It can be a tough slog. I know many other indie publishers, because it is growing, but it's still kind of tight-knit. And I know some that have produced incredible words and stuff, and in the end, after X amount of issues, it gets very hard, and because it's usually just a passion project, right? It's not something to make money. Indie publishers don't make money. It's usually about love. So there's pros and cons, and it really is about passion. Just a quick talk about print production. So those of you who are interested in actual print, for us, you can see there, with our first one, we had 1,000 copies. Second and third, 1,500 copies. Small, but not terribly small. Small. Yeah. Type of printing, digital or offset. Usually, if you've got a small amount that you want to print, they'll usually say go digital. If you've got a slightly larger amount, offset. The format, you've just seen the format. It's kind of like a pretty standard format. We use materials that are recyclable or have been recycled, so we believe in sustainability and want to obviously protect our environment as much as possible. And our printer and we fulfill out of Berlin. So we're created here locally, we have a global team, but we're actually printed and shipped out of Berlin. And just a very quick note about why we do that, because people will often email and go, oh, what do you mean, it's coming from Berlin? Or it's simply because we have a global audience. So we don't just have people here. We do have a readership here, but we also have many people from the US, many people in Europe, really, really global. And having Berlin as our central point to ship out of is actually the most efficient and the most economical. So it makes sense. And the printers there are fantastic. There's fantastic printers here, but for us to send, and I do talk about this, but for us to send something like this globally to the US or to Europe could cost anywhere between $15 and $20. Like it pretty much makes it an immediate barrier to continuing, and you don't want that. You want to just keep on making. So, just to finish this off, and we are about She Shoots Film and niche works and speaking to our audience, although we're about film photography and women, what we're really trying to put out there is women's stories, women's narrative, women's conversations, women's dialogue, and this is just our vehicle for it. So I'm just going to provide some examples of the sorts of work that's gone into both issue 1, issue 2, and issue 3. And that will give you some insight, particularly for those of you that haven't seen the magazine at all, could be helpful. We are theme-driven. First one was self-portrait, second mother, third metamorphosis. We bring a whole lot of different views and perspectives into one issue, which is actually pretty tricky to create something cohesive and something that speaks in some sort of logical sort of way. And at the end of it, the biggest thing is greater than the parts. So you have this thing at the end that speaks, or we'd like to think that. So this is Silke Searbold. She had something in our first issue. She was one of our interviewees. She does some incredible work in terms of self-portraiture, obviously. And mostly her self-portraiture is often her concealing her face, often nude in, she did like a desert series. This is actually in a lab. So she's done quite a bit of work in terms of this. But I'm going to talk a little bit directly to the work as well. So the most physical image I've created is Chemical Lab. I was laying 10 feet off the ground on top of a 10-inch narrow cabinet surrounded by broken glass. That's a self-portrait with film. If you shoot with film, this is really tricky, really hard, and really dangerous. So that's amazing work. Sorry, that's not a great image. Again, it's a self-portrait, you can't see. It's not supposed to be pixelated, it's actually a beautiful image. Don't know why it looks like that, but I'll move on. Carol Dass, she's US-based. Photographing for decades, long time, right? I cannot even make myself speak to the term selfie. I have been making self-portraits for over 30 years. So we're really trying to provide that really diverse experience. We've got a great crowd of women that are just coming through and creating these amazing works, but we also want to respect women that have been around for ages and have got something really great to offer us.